All right, welcome back. So we're going to be taking a look now at how to clean up some things in Pinterest. And what we've got here are these edit links. Right now, if we were to log out and go back to our pins page, these edit links would still be here. And if we try to edit something, we're not going to be allowed to. If we try to delete something, we're also not going to be allowed to. But let's go ahead and see if we can't make this a little bit nicer. We want to hide this if that person is not logged in and is not the correct person. So you don't want another user to be able to see edit and delete unless they own that pin. So in order to do that, we're going to go into our views and then into pins and into our index.html. And here you see the code for that. We have our loop looping over each pin, outputting our bootstrap code so that we can use masonry. And if we come down here, you'll see the edit and the delete buttons. I'm going to give these some space just so that we can kind of see what's going on here. And what I want to do now is actually put this div inside of an if statement. And we can do that and check to see if that person is the correct user. So we're going to use ERB syntax here. We're not using an equal sign because we don't want to output the if statement. We want to make it so that if this is true, then we will display this content. And we'll go ahead and put our end down here just so that we know what we're working with. We can probably indent that one just so that we keep our proper nesting. And we're going to do an if. So what we want to do is check to see if the pin.user, which is our current model, we have a pin belongs to a user and user has many pins. So we have access to pin.user. And we can check to see if it's equal to something that we have. And when we're logged in to our app, Devise surfaces a few variables to us. We've used these a few times in other places, but we can also use them here inside of our ERB. And so current user is going to be equal to a user model if we're currently logged in, and that will be the actual user that we're trying to access. So if the pin's user is equal to our user, then we'll show this content. So let's go ahead and save that, and we're currently logged out. So let's go ahead and refresh, and you start to see that those all go away. Let's go ahead and log in. Okay, so now that we're logged in, we now see our edit and delete keys. Because these are owned by me, I can go in here and edit and delete pins. We can delete another one. So pretty cool. That is a really easy way to show and hide things. You can do that with really anything that you encounter in your app. So now that we have that working, we're going to go ahead and try to add a few more features to our user model. So if we go to edit profile, this is still default code and markup from Devise, which we can come in and make this a little bit prettier later. But right now we only have an email and a password. And what we want to do is extend this to include a username, a bio, maybe eventually a user profile page. And so I've got a little list here of some of the features that we'd like to add in this next video, which is going to be adding usernames, giving that username kind of a profile page so that you can go to something like my username, and then you can have this link so that eventually when you put a domain on this, then you would have something like fakepinterest.com/myusername. So we'll do that. And then there's some nice things we can do, like adding an avatar to our user, then displaying that avatar on the profile page, displaying the bio, all of that. And so we're going to go ahead and do that now. So the first thing we want to do is generate a migration. So we already have a user model. If we go open our models here, we have a pin model and a user model. If we open users, you'll see that it's pretty basic here. We've got our Devise information and our active record association for our pins. But what we want to do is add something to this. So let's go ahead and open our schema, which you can do by going to db/schema. And again, here's our users table. And we want to add a few things to this. So we're going to add a username to start, and we'll add the other items in a little bit. But let's go ahead and do Rails generate migration. And if you want to be able to have Rails generate the migration for you, we can do something like add username to users. If you do that, that will understand what field you want to add to which table. So add underscore field name underscore to underscore table name. But we also have to define what username is. And in our case, we don't want usernames to be very long. So I'm just going to use string. That currently limits you to 255 characters. But really, we can then check in our model to make sure that those are significantly shorter than that. We don't really want a user to have a username that long. But if we go ahead and hit enter, we will run that migration in just a second here so we can see it was created. But let's just check on it before we run it. So here you can see I'm currently using Git, so it's turned green. But if we come and check out our migration here, you'll see that we have our change, add column users, the field that's going to be added to the users table, and the type that it is. So let's go ahead and do rake db migrate because we've made a change and we now have this new migration. We'll go ahead and do that. And you can see the add column has run. If we update our schema here, you'll see that we now have tstring username added to our users table. So now we can go ahead and add this to our form, and we're going to have to look at how Devise handles us adding new parameters to it. So let me go ahead and close out of some of these tabs here. And what we're going to do is go to our app and log out. And this is going to be up to you, but what I'm going to do is only add it to our sign-up page. I don't want users to be able to change their username later. You absolutely can make that work. It's going to work exactly the same, but there's a lot of logic that you're going to have to add later if someone is using a certain username and you're having your users send out some kind of sharing link that says come view my profile at some username, and if they change their username and you don't have any history of what their username used to be, then you won't know where to send that user. Some apps don't care about that. If you change your username, then that username is now fair game for other people to use. But in this case, we're just going to make it so that you have to set it when you sign up. So here's our email, here's our password. We want to edit this view and add that field to our view so that you can sign up in our form. So let's go ahead and find out where Devise keeps track of that. And we can find it under views, and then Devise keeps all of their views in the same folder. If we then open that up, we can see that the different models that exist from Devise. And so users, when you create and edit a user, you're actually creating and editing a registration. And when you're logging in and logging out, you're creating and destroying sessions. Password is used for creating either resetting a password, which is very useful. Confirmations is the screen that you're going to see when someone clicks on an email that says, please click this link to verify your confirmation. But if we open registrations, you'll see an edit and a new. If you go into edit, you'll see that this is the edit screen. So this is where we have the ability for them to delete their account. This is the edit settings screen. So we can close that and open new. So new is our sign up page, and you can see sign up at the top there. This is our new user page. We have a form for creating our user here. So email, password confirmation. So at the very top of this, I'm going to create a new div for our username, and let's keep it looking like they have here. And still, we're working with that scaffolded code from Devise. We would then come in the next couple of videos, we're going to come in and actually bootstrap this so that it looks a little bit nicer. And we're going to go ahead and grab this label and this field here. And this is going to be for our username. We can change email field to text field. And we want to do autofocus true there. So let's take off the autofocus on email. And so that just means that our cursor will get added to this field when the page loads. And let's change this to username. So now we have username autofocus. We can save this and refresh our page, and we now have a new field here. The issue is going to be now that we technically can create new users, but this field is going to be ignored. We explored this in our pins creation, so being able to create a pin through our create method, that we need to be able to permit certain fields when we send a post to this function here. And we do that with pin params. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, pin params is telling us that we require this attribute of pin, and that attribute, that essentially a hash of pin, has to have doesn't have to have, but it will only permit description and pin image. If someone tries to send in some other parameter, it would filter it out and you wouldn't have access to it. So in this case, we had description and pin image. We would need to add username to our permitted parameters inside of Devise. However, as you look over on the side, we don't have a user's controller. The user's controller is currently being handled by Devise controllers. And so if that's the case, we know we need to go take a look at the Devise documentation. So currently, if you tried to sign up, it would work, but anything you put in the username field will get scrubbed out and you won't have access to it, so you'll end up with users that have a nil username. But if we go pull up the Devise documentation, you can see here that we need to do something to permit this. And in this case, they say that if you want to add parameters the lazy way, you can do it using a before filter in your application controller. Now, they say this is the lazy way because we're really just hijacking how Devise is built, and we're adding new items to it. You won't want to do this if you have multiple Devise models. So in our case, we only really have one, and I think this is fine. But if you explore eventually having multiple models, like maybe a marketplace, so you might have a user model that is like a store owner, and then another model that is for a shopper, and that way you may actually have two different models, and there's a different way you might support that. But let's take a look at what's happening here. We have a before action being run that is calling this configure permitted parameters if, and then there's this flag here of Devise controller. And so if this is true, this method will get called, and if it's a Devise controller, now this is something that Devise has given us access to. If this returns true, then we're going to run this before action. And anytime you're on a page that's being served up via a Devise controller, this will be true, and this will get run. And so here you can see that we want to permit on sign up these keys, username, and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this here. So again, this is all coming from the Devise documentation. And we're going to go ahead and add this to our application controller. So we'll go below the protect from forgery and run our before action. In this case, we actually have the same keys, so it's okay. We don't need to change this at all. But if you had called this something else, you would want to change that to the field name that you gave it. In our case, we have username, and we want this to run. This is going to be a protected method. So let's see, we can call that from there. And then let's go ahead and check out our app again. This should be all that we need to allow our username to be created. So let's go ahead and create a new user. I'm going to say this is just a test, and let's put in a valid email address, and we'll give it a password and sign up. Now, we aren't currently using our username anywhere, but if we were to open our terminal here and do Rails console, and we can do user.last. So that will get us the last user that we just created. There's our encrypted password. Here's our reset password token. Let's see, username. It's right there at the end. So username, this is just a test. So that is in there, which is great. Now if we go click on pins, we could do a few things here. We could actually add the username to this pin so that other users can see who created that account. So let's go ahead and do that, and that will probably be it for this video, and we'll break these next features out into a couple other videos. So let's go ahead and pull up our index again. So we can close our application controller and open our views, close our Devise views, and open our pins views. And in our index here, let's go ahead and put it above the description. So I'm going to create just another paragraph here. And let's go ahead and we'll just add a strong tag around it for now. We're going to come back and style this up a little bit differently. You'd probably give this a class and then tell it to use a font weight of strong or bold instead of doing strong tags. But this will essentially look the same way. So now we can actually output what our username is. So we can do that by traversing our relationship between the pin and the user. So we have access to pin inside of our loop, at pins.each, do pin. So we have access to pin and we have access to user. We know that because we've used it here. So this will give us, if we were to go into Rails console and output this, we would get back our user model, which then allows us to say username. So if we save that and refresh our account here, we should see our username. And let's see, we're not seeing a username in this case because the user who created these pins does not have a username. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new pin to test this. This should be a username of this is just a test. So let's grab the Ray image, Ray and BB8 in the desert. Create a pin, and you'll see now that our brand new pin has a username. These ones do not, so this is just something that while you're developing your application, you will probably want to go clear out this data by deleting them and then making sure that you delete that user and create a new user using that new username. So there you go. There's our pin. You can see here that this one's owned by me and I'm able to edit and delete it. These ones are not owned by me. These are owned by that original user that I created, and I can look at them, but I can't delete or edit them. In our next video, I just realized that we also don't have a way for us to go and view these images, so we can update these images to be links, take us to a specific pin, and we will do that in another post. So let's go ahead and add that to our feature set here. Link to pin image to take you to pins show. Perfect.